Hello, 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 and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jameelah, and I am a master manifestor, and I'm sure you are too, because you are watching content like this. This is holistic manifesting, where I believe in the whole body, whole mind, and whole being experience. And today I'm discussing in this video why so many people do not know who they are. And this is not to say that getting to know who you are or figuring out who you are and what values and morals and mindset, like personality traits, all those things that are that resonate most deeply with you is not a process. It is a process. But sometimes we get to a space in our lives where we're trying to figure out, how did I get to this space and why do I have no clue about who I am, what I want, and where do I want to go next in my life? Most of it is pertaining to the act of suppressing our authenticity. From like the moment we are little kids and we come into this world, we are taught to suppress many aspects of who we are. And depending on the environments that we're brought up in and what those traits actually are, who our parents are, who our siblings are, who our primary groups are, who our teachers are, who's our, pastors in church or wherever it is that you may have practiced religion. Like, everybody has almost a say. And one of the things that's important to remember about the human experience is that we are steeped in survival. And that survival is not just based on physical threats, it's also based on emotional and social threats. So the idea of not being able to please someone in our immediate environment plays a big role in whether or not we show up as our authentic selves, even as children. Now, there are some people who've never occupied that space, and you know them sometimes. It's like people will say ever since they were little, they have been exactly who they are, and they have not let anybody shame them, blame them, or guilt them into being anything different. But the vast majority of us, we come through these environments and our way of coping or dealing with many of our interactions is just constantly covering up aspects of ourselves. And in some, I feel like tragic instances, it's peeling back aspects of yourself that could truly serve you at a different time in your life. When we encounter these things in our environments as like young people, as kids, the last thing that we want is to not please or to not please the people around us or to not fit into the environment. So we start to learn a lot of techniques of suppressing who we are. For instance, if there's something that you're really not into as a kid, say it's a game, or say it's like a new trend that's happening or something, and maybe these days it's social media for a lot of kids, and you have a friend group that you hang with and everybody's into it, 9 times out of 10, you are going to suppress the fact that you don't really like that thing in order to fit in with the group. And many times these days, what I notice, even if it's just in social media space, there's a pitchfork mentality, right? Every time somebody doesn't like one specific thing somebody talks about, or they don't agree with one thing, instead of just saying, hey, we're two people that have different perspectives on this thing, let's move on, there's almost like a burning at the stake that people try to put you through when you just see something differently. And if they actually wanted you to understand their perspective, being negative towards you in the ways that I've seen wouldn't even work, right? So you just know that it's just this not one of us mentality that runs around, right? And if you're not careful doing a lot of these processes, you'll just say yes to things, or you'll do things, or you'll participate in activities where you're not even remotely interested. And then doing these things over time, continuously saying yes to, the football game when you really don't even like football, or saying yes to a frilly dress for prom when you're not even into that kind of stuff, when you prefer to wear maybe a jumpsuit or something that's sparkly, whatever it is you're into. Saying yes to those things over time, eventually you back yourself into a space of lacking authenticity. And because these things have worked so well for you to be able to fit in certain social environments, many of us go on to be permanently embedded in these environments to where we can't, only 50% of who we are, we can share. Because if we shared anything else, then we probably would lose the friend. Do you know how many people, and I'm not even into politics at all, but do you know how many people can't share with people like who they voted for in different elections, and they can't share their perspective because they already know that if they did, other people would pretty much disown them or not like them, or, vice versa, whatever. And I find that to be so interesting because the whole point of the human existence is to collaborate and connect with others. And if someone doesn't agree with you in like one area, there's no way the world gets better because you just put that person out of your life in your space. It's just kind of weird. Like, that's just a mindset that so many people have. And like, that just struck me just now. It's like, that is so weird that people think getting the people out of their space makes a difference. It really doesn't. They still think and believe the same thing. You'd have a better chance of having the world that you believe that you want to experience if you kept them close and you shared your ideas and you were tolerable or respectful of the way that they felt about things. And then natural osmosis happened back and forth. But instead of that, most people just get angry and like just shut people to the side when it comes to different perspectives. I mean, we all have the right to do it. I'm not judging that aspect, but it's just another way that people get away from their authenticity because they don't want to experience that sort of isolation. And this happens a lot in long-term relationships, marriages and stuff, especially if people are, because I witnessed this growing up in my own family. If they have a family that's a married couple and they're steeped deeply into one side of the family. And then, the couple is very embedded. That's a better word. They're embedded in both sides of the family. And then you have the religious, they're embedded in the religious environment, and say they know people from your work and your job and all this, and friends of the family or the children's parents, friends and all this. It's so much harder work to be your authentic self if that's going to clash with all of these social groups you have around you that's connected to your long-term relationship. This is why I think there's such a popular thing with the gray divorce now, meaning that people divorce when the children are out of the house and they get later in age and stuff like that. Is mostly because people go along to get along for a very long time in their unauthentic selves. And then when they finally become who they are, either the spouse doesn't like it anymore and say, I'm not doing this, or they decide, I don't like this anymore, and then they go do something else. So if we can get out of the mindset of anything being good for us in our lives, requiring us to suppress our authenticity, we can get closer to who we are and who we're supposed to be on a regular basis. I think sometimes we're so afraid to lose something in every instance. We don't really realize that there's nothing to lose if it's not being attached to the authentic version of yourself. Matter of fact, it's more to lose when you attach to things that are inauthentic to you, because you'll shapeshift yourself to fit into these little nooks and crannies in society. And then when it finally wears on you, because it's tough, it's exhausting being connected to things that don't truly resonate with you. When it finally wears down on you, either, crash out real big, or, people around you reject it. And then eventually you got to go do something else anyway. So I feel like if you really want to lose less on a long-term basis, that's going to be built into the idea of how much of my real self am I showing up with in this environment. And what I found is some environments where I've suppressed my authenticity for a very long time, and then I started becoming my true self, I was completely ostracized. And so like the old version of me would have been, had the mindset of, how dare they? I'm being my true self, blah, blah, blah. And I had all of these, they're against me sort of attitudes with many things. But when I think deeper about it now at this stage in my life, I realized that I was working off of a false image. And because I was building my life around this false image, they had the right to latch onto this image of me. Right. And they have the right to reject the image of me that's the most authentic one once I reveal it. So we can't always get upset with people when we've showed them one version of ourselves. Then we're just like, well, if you were truly a friend, well, maybe that person didn't have enough depth to be a friend to a person that was who you authentically were. And because they're not there yet, it doesn't mean they're a bad guy. And so we have to remember that, too. But it can mean that maybe we should have showed up as our authentic selves from the very beginning. And then this is not also to discount things like certain circumstances and situations actually show us who we are when we don't know it yet. Sometimes we don't even know that we're suppressing. And when we get involved in these situations and we get involved in these circumstances, we realize you're like, I don't even like this. I don't even want to do this. And it may have been something that resonated with you for a long time because it was easier to fit in. It was easier just to say yes to everything that was happening in the environment. But when that no longer was an option, when maybe just saying yes and not having boundaries and not having a real specific idea of who you are was on the table, it became a burden. And then so we move away from these things. You're like, I can no longer do this because it's not truly who I am, right? And it takes a while to walk that path and to get into that mindset. I can honestly say at this point in my life, I've never had so much clarity on who I am and what I want in so many areas. And matter of fact, one of my daughter's friends came by and she was telling my daughter that your mom seems like the kind of person that knows exactly what she wants. She's telling the truth. But if you had met me 20 years ago, is not the answer. Everything everybody else thought was okay was what I did. And I don't know if it was being raised as like the youngest person in a very large family, whether it's the mindset of like, I just want to fit in with the other siblings and just like, not be left behind and go to this place or go to, all these sort of things that I don't care about at all anymore, like in my life. But I don't know if that's where the beginning of it came, having, a religious environment to where, certain things were off limits. But all we do is work ourselves into a spot to where we have to peel back all the layers to become who we are again. And my thought process is rather sooner than later. When we spend too much time on the wrong side of our authenticity, we just start putting ourselves on a trajectory to go down roads that we don't truly care for and we don't truly desire. If we are always focused on, is this something that truly resonates with me? Is this something that has wiggle room for me to expand and grow and change? Because that's a big thing too. I've been in connection and a relationship with people to where they actually thought that nobody was supposed to change ever. And I'm like, what are we, 5? Like, people are going to change. And that is a part of our authenticity. That is a part of who we are. I'm not going to be the same person I was when I was raising toddlers as I am when I'm raising teenagers. That's not to say the very core of who I am and what my values and beliefs as far as ethics go in my life is going to change. No, I'm not going to be having agendas for people or belittling people in certain ways. But the way that I operate and the way that I see the world may open up a little bit. Sometimes it may close a little bit. Sometimes some things may get dropped. And so the idea that people are not supposed to change and maneuver and become these new versions of themselves, and everybody's doing this all the time, is really sort of a scarce and stagnant way of thinking. So you have to always ask yourself, is this environment going to have wiggle room for me to be who I am, for me to be authentic to who I am? And I've seen this in many work environments. I've experienced it many times where I know I'm like, hey, this is the kind of place where if I decided to start working on this instead of working on that, they would be very open to it because I can feel the freedom in the space. So where in your life do you feel like you're boxed in? Do you feel like you are suppressing who you are? Because the more you suppress your authenticity, the more you don't get to realize who you are. And let me tell you, life does not wait for us when we have no idea of who we are. It doesn't wait. It's going to keep on going. We're going to, rotate out of this thing. We're going to be that spirit leaving the body. And it's just going to be a missed opportunity for living that most authentic version of who we are. Because I do believe that we are all very uniquely placed and poised in this world. And there's no perfect in the way that we think there is. There's no image of perfect in the way that we think there is. I don't believe that. I believe if that was a such thing, people could not be so different from each other. And then the way that we're raised, some people step right into trauma when they're born. Some people come into rainbows and butterflies. And there's nothing that you can do coming here that we know consciously of, right? Even though, it's been said that we choose this experience. There's nothing that we can do to say, I don't want those parents. I want the other ones. So there's something about the experience that we have, even the pain, even the pitfalls, and even what we call trauma these days is what is supposed to happen. Because through those experiences and through those interactions, we're constantly creating this version of the world that we all live in today and expanding it and growing it. And I don't believe also that we're supposed to be here to sort of like change the world in major ways. I think at any given time, there's always something going on that a large majority of people are not going to love or like. I think that's inherent in the human experience. I think it's inherent in the human experience to be discontented at most times. And if we didn't know the darkness so well, then we would never be drawn so deeply to the light. And so the balance is always there, but it happens in a flash. So avoid suppressing your authenticity as much as you possibly can. Be okay with being disliked. Have the courage to be looked at as the fool. Have the courage to be on the outside. Have the courage to be the person not everybody wants to hang around because they don't understand who you are at any given time. At any given time, have the courage to be in isolation if it takes isolation. You will be better for it when it's all said and done. Anyway, I hope y'all have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day.